Good evening, everybody. Thank you for coming. Gentlemen, we've already started the conversation on environmental justice, which is great. So let's ask some more environmental justice and environmental questions. So first up, the New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection has recognized that Newark suffers disproportionate impacts from multiple sources of air pollution, as do other of-color and low-income communities. This pollution, so let's stop there for a minute. So communities of color and low-income communities of all color have more pollution than other communities. So Newark as a whole is basically an environmental justice community. It's disproportionately of color and disproportionately poor. So Newark is getting more pollution than other areas of New Jersey. The pollution has very real consequences to the health of Newark residents, causing asthma, cancer, heart disease, and death. So it's not only guns that are killing our youth and other people in Newark, it's also the pollution. There's an ordinance currently before the council that will promote environmental justice by giving the city the ability to evaluate the cumulative impacts, the amount of pollution, of any new proposed facility in relation to the amount of already existing pollution in Newark. This means that facilities that would greatly raise the level of pollution might not be allowed to locate in Newark. Mr. Brock, I think you're up. Will you support this ordinance? And if your answer is yes, how will you ensure that it is both passed and implemented?
So yes, I think, first of all, I think the council is probably one of the most progressive councils in the state. We've passed some of the most progressive legislation that the state has seen. So I think the council will unequivocally pass this ordinance, the impact study. We need an impact, even the ones that are on his ticket, they're gonna pass it as well. The impact study, there's an impact study that needs to be done by the residents and community organizations in this community. They do the impact study and they do the impact ordinance in terms of any new development, any new institution that comes into our city. We begin to see how that affects the quality of air as it exists now. If it affects it in a negative way, we begin to move those businesses out of the city and move that development. The same way this whole argument around what was happening with PSE&G and the site over there in the Fairmont district. So how did that, the development of that, how would that impact the residents in that area? How would that impact air quality? How would that impact the health of the people in that community? An ordinance allows us to tell developers like that we don't want this in our community. As a matter of fact, is detrimental to the residents of this neighborhood, and we need you to take it to another city or another place. I absolutely, unequivocally support legislation like that, and we have to make sure it's enforced by making sure that we have the Office of Sustainability with the kind of teeth and organization that it needs, not a ceremonial position with folks that put out these kind of reports and just move on, but they actually have the ability to enforce the things that they're talking about every day through code enforcers, through having meetings with these developers, through having meetings with owners to begin to tell them this is what you must do to begin to reduce the level of impact, negative impact that you have on our communities and our neighborhoods. And this is the kind of funding that we need to make these projects available and functioning. So I support not only that ordinance, I support the Office of Sustainability in Newark that it has now, and I support the sustainability plan, and I want to make sure that it is instituted in the city.
That's Jeffries.
Again, I think the question really highlights the fact that, unfortunately, we are a community that's beset by environmental racism, and African Americans aren't the only ones who are subjected to environmental racism. It's Latinos, and it's also immigrant communities. And that's why it's not coincidental that we see the disproportionate amounts of pollutants in our community. We have some of the most polluted and dangerous sites in the United States of America and even the world right here in the city of Newark. And we have to have a mayor who's aggressive to address that, and we have to also be clear about some of the causes. So absolutely, I would absolutely support the cumulative impact ordinance. As I said earlier, anytime development comes into the city of Newark, I'm going to be the kind of mayor where we're going to have an environmental impact study consistent with what is contemplated by the cumulative impact study, where we're going to examine what is the environmental impact of that development. What is the environmental impact of the ancillary services connected to that development? Is it going to bring in more trucks and more transportation of goods and services? What does that mean for the air we breathe? What does that mean for the environments in which our children are growing up into? And then we're going to connect it to that analysis. We're going to demand a plan and a strategy, not simply to mitigate, but ideally to eliminate any additional toxins or at least any additional harmful impacts that our young people and our residents might suffer from. So I absolutely support the ordinance, but at the end of the day, an ordinance at the end of the day is really just a piece of paper. And we can create a new office, and at the end of the day, that's simply shuffling things around. What you need is a mayor who will enforce, so that in the real world, there's actually less pollution. So in the real world, there's less toxins going into the lungs of our young people and going into the lungs of our residents. So that's the background I have. As a former prosecutor, as a former law enforcement official, this is essentially what I've done for 15 years. Enforce rules, enforce norms, so that in the real world, we produce better results for the people that we're here to serve.